income, expense, asset, liability. See, I don't really care about my FICO score. A FICO score just basically registers, are you trustworthy with borrowing money? But a bank will never say, I borrow in the hundreds of millions of dollars. A FICO score not going to get me there, okay? And so it's kind of a ruse. I mean, it's important, but not for me. So these are the four words: income, expense, asset, liability. And the last two words are the words cash flow. And that's why the game is called cash flow. And the secret to being rich is not a college education, but can you control cash flow? And this is what cash flow looks like. So this here, you need this, income, expense, asset, liability. Again, this is, you get a job. And this was my poor dad, go to school, get a job, get your PhD. And so this here is cash flow. So the income comes in and it goes out this way. First line of expense is tax. So this is a poor person's cash flow pattern. It's not how much money you make. Most people, I don't care if you have a PhD or no school at all, but they can't control the cash flowing out through their expenses. And so that's why people like Susie Orman say, cut up your credit cards, live below your means, because you're a spendaholic. So that's a poor person. This is a middle class person's cash flow pattern. And this is where the house comes in. First thing, most kids do when they get pay raise and all that, they buy themselves a bigger house. Oh, my house is an asset. Now, who tells you that? Your real estate agent, of course.
Yeah.
Right? Because they want to give you this false sense of security while you're getting screwed.
Exactly.
But when you look at what happens with a house, a personal residence, something I live in, the money comes in, it goes out, and this is middle class, but it also goes out through a mortgage payments. Oh, but I don't have a mortgage. You still have taxes. You still, Hawaii just raised the property taxes on me, which is probably I'm going to sell. I'm going to get out of Hawaii. But you have taxes and you have upkeep. So money's always flowing out. So that's why your house is not an asset, is because it's taking money from your pocket. So very simply said, assets put money in my pocket, liabilities take money from my pocket. And then this here is, so I'm not saying don't buy a house, but here is a house. And I started when I was 25, bought my first house, and it was an apartment, it was an investment property. I didn't live in it, I rented it out, and it put money in my pocket. So very simple, the definition of asset and liability is not the house or this, it's cash flow. Where is the cash flowing? So as a young person, and to all millennials, or if you're old, financial intelligence is the ability to control cash flow. And that's what they don't teach you at school. They tell you to go to school, get a job. First thing is tax. You'll pay, most of your money will go out through taxes in your lifetime. And then they tell you to buy a house and a car. And a car is an asset. No, a car is a liability. You got insurance, gas, upkeep, and all this. Now, if you buy a taxi car, it could be an asset. It's cash flow. And that's very simply it. So this is a poor person. Money goes out. There's a lot. We just interviewed some National Football League players who make millions of dollars in their 20s. And most of them are broke in 2 years because they can't control cash flow. Intelligence, IQ, is can you control cash flow? Not your college degree. College degrees are important, but they're not going to teach you this. So the cash flow game trains you over and over and over and over again to get your money in here to get cash flow this way. So I started with this. It cost me $18,000. I paid for the credit card and I put $25 in my pocket. Okay. It's an infinite return because The cash flow paid for the mortgage, it paid the expenses, pays the operating costs, and I still made $25. Kim's first deal was the same. Hers wasn't $18,000, it was $50,000, $45,000. And they put $25 in her pocket. But Kim now owns 6,500 rental properties, and she pays no tax because the income comes from here. If you have a job, you pay tax, but income, the rich get richer because when you have asset income, taxes are less. You can get it down to zero if you want. But that's financial intelligence, but can you control cash flow? Okay? So say it again, assets what?
Assets put money into your pocket, liabilities take money out of your pocket.
And so as a young person, you just focus on that. So when you're buying a new house, you gotta say, is this gonna take money or put money? You buy an apartment house, is it gonna take money or put money? That's it. It's cash flow. Six most important words for financial intelligence and IQ is income, expense, asset, liability, but it's really cash flow. Now, if I could bring up a more horrible subject, is do you think people can be assets or liabilities?
I think they could be both, to be honest.
So for most young people, they fall in love, they get married, they have kids. Is a child an asset or liability?
A child is definitely a liability.
Now, I'm not saying don't have kids, but you gotta think, the kid is expensive, and they don't get cheaper. They get more expensive every year. You know, then they go to college, and then it gets even more expensive. So a human being, and that sounds horrible to all the socialists and communists out there, but the fact is, kids cost money. But as an old guy, I want you to think about this. As I get older, as people get older, family members become liabilities. So I have a friend whose mother, thank God she had long-term, I don't know what they call it, but they just canceled it on her. She can go to a old age home, and I think the price is $18,000 a month. So that as a young person, as your parents get older, the question is, can I afford to spend $20,000 a month on my mom or my dad's long-term health care? Yes or no?
No, not right now.
No. So, and this is going to happen to my generation. Many people don't realize, but their brothers or sisters' kids and all this become liabilities to them. So as a person who's fairly well off, and Kim and my friends are thinking about two-legged liabilities. So I know today that if my sisters become ill, I'm the one with the money, and it's my responsibility to pay for them. Same as my brothers and their kids. So these are things that people don't think about a lot of times, is what happens not only as they grow up, but what happens as they age. Statistics show the average person, like my generation, let's have $1 million. 80% of that $1 million will be gone in the last 2 years of life because medical expenses go through the roof. And today, insurance companies are canceling, I forget the name of it, but my friend's mother, it was just canceled. So he doesn't have $18,000 a month. So he had to bring his mother into his house and, create another room and all this. He said, well, I love her, which he does, but she's a big liability. And all he had was savings. So the savings are being depleted going out this way. Okay, so with your question about houses and people, but people are assets and liabilities. For most people with our favorite subject, a 401k is an asset or liability.
From what I've learned from you, it's definitely a liability.
Or an IRA or a pension, because it's always going out this way. There's no guarantee it'll be there. So this is the basic of financial intelligence, financial literacy, stuff like this. Another thing about people is you have a bad advisor, like a bad financial planner or a crook, or a business partner that's a crook, a wife that's a crook and all that. There could be human liabilities. I have two friends right now who just joined the $1 Million Club. They married beautiful women, got divorced, and the woman is now costing $1 million a year in alimony. So their beautiful wife and the child support, it's $1 million going. And she's only 40 years old, so she has a whole pile of boyfriends but it's costing him $1 million a year for her boyfriend. So I said, I want to be her boyfriend. Not really, you know.
Oh my goodness.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Financial IQ is, can you control cash flow? IQ means how big a problem can you solve? So if, like my friend whose mother is now costing him $18,000 a month, well, thank God he has about $100,000 in savings, but in 1 year it's gone.
Yeah.
That's not high IQ. But for myself, $18,000 a month, I can go make that much cash flow pretty easily.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're like in your 20s, you're something, well, how am I going to make, let's say, by the time you're probably $100,000 a month to take care of my parents? Because like it or not, it's cash flow and they become liabilities. And the problem is getting worse because the bond markets are not providing income. So many insurance companies have to renege on their promises to provide the cash flow to take care of our loved ones. The same as medical.
Wow.
And so that's why when people say, I'm going to go out on my own and do all these things, they're kind of doing what they love, which is good. But they've really got to think about how many liabilities do they have. It's not just your rent, you know, it's your family. And so for me and for Kim, we have family members, but they're liabilities. So that's why we stay over here. Hopefully nothing will go wrong. But if one of my sisters got ill and she needs $100,000 a month, at least I can provide it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they go indigent, whatever they call it. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
No, thank you for sharing so much about this content and all this information. That's going to be super valuable for all my friends and all the millennials out there just like me.
So I have two friends who are now in the $1 million a year club. It doesn't mean they're making $1 million. It's their wives are taking $1 million a year out of their pocket and their kids and all this. And I go, you should have thought about that 20 years ago. But you don't, because you're in love and you're going to have kids and you're going to make it together. Mm-hmm. But your parents are great role models. So once again, there's 6 words you have to know and be masters of: income, expense, asset, liability, cash flow. You can control cash flow. That's financial intelligence, financial IQ, and financial literacy. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in the stock market. See, why would you save money when they're printing trillions of dollars? The gap between the 1% and 99% is massive. You see, it's not just money. You have to step back and look at the bigger picture.
So what do you do?
In every one of us is a poor person. There's still a poor person inside me. There's also a middle class person. And the middle class person wants security. They want that steady paycheck. And there's a rich person. And they're all inside of us, except that it's not taught. You're taught to go to school, get a job, and get a paycheck. You're not taught how to get rich. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my rich dad refused to pay me. He said the paycheck was one of the most damaging things you could take in your life. He says the moment you take a paycheck, you're an employee, and that's the mindset. So my rich dad never paid me. It drove my poor dad, government employee, nuts. You gotta pay people, you gotta pay people. And Rich Dad was not saying that the paycheck was bad. He says he didn't want to be a slave to money. So as an entrepreneur, if Rich Dad folded, I just started another company. I don't need a paycheck. I don't need anybody to take care of me. If my government doesn't like me, I move to another country because they need entrepreneurs there. So the entrepreneur is not so much the business. The entrepreneur is really the mindset and the skill sets and the different set of rules. You see, I don't operate, small business does not operate in the same rules as big business. Entrepreneur is a mindset first, a skill set, and rules. And depending upon whether you're an employee or a small business, the rules are different. The mindsets are different, the skill sets are different.
You could say one thing to somebody who's never been an entrepreneur and they're thinking about making the leap of faith into becoming an entrepreneur. What could you tell them?
Well, I'll just tell them the same thing that happened to me. My last paycheck, I still remember it clearly. It was one of the worst and the best days of my life. And I was in Puerto Rico. I was working for Xerox, and my boss gave me my last. It wasn't a paycheck; it was a bonus check. I think it was about $30,000, taxable. It's the only problem with that. So I got this check, and I went, "Holy mackerel!" You know what I mean? So I was excited, but I was also disturbed. And so this other guy comes up to me. His name was John, and John says to me, he says, "You're going to be back." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because you're going to fail." I looked at him and said, "Look," few expletive words, because that's what he did. He left Xerox, failed, and he came back. And I said, "Look, you failed and you came back, but I'm going to fail and I'm never coming back." And that's the attitude. Do you know what I mean? If you say, "Well, if I fail, I'll go back to mommy and daddy," then that's what you'll do. So if you fail, that's when I became an entrepreneur, because I had no money. I had no money for years. You know, I didn't have a paycheck. But that's what my rich dad encouraged me to do. He says, when you don't have this paycheck, you get hungrier, smarter, and it's a test of your character. Will you become a crook? Will you become dishonest? Will you cheat and steal? Or will you become a better human being? So really, that's the benefit of becoming an entrepreneur, is you really find out who you are when you don't have anything. So you always have to look at the big picture. Too many people look at, well, what's going to happen to me? When you look at the big picture, you're also going to know that when something bad happens, something good's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But you got to prepare for whatever is coming. If you think next 20 years will be like the last 20 years, you're going to get creamed. You know, when you and I go to the supermarket and we buy a carton of milk, we always check for the expiration date. But most people do not check for the expiration date on their brains. Instead of get out of debt, I get into debt. You know, I just refinanced $300 million in debt. I went from 5% to 2.5% interest. I made a fortune. Every month, more money comes in because my cost of money has gone down. So while some financial experts are saying get out of debt, I'm saying learn how to use debt. See, when I came back from in Vietnam in January '73, the first thing my rich dad said to me was go to school to learn how to invest in real estate. It wasn't real estate, it was how to use debt and taxes. Debt and taxes make the rich richer. Debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. So all the rich guys who are doctors and lawyers, or, you know, those guys, they're getting creamed. And they don't know why.
Doctors are getting creamed.
Oh yeah, they may get more money, but the take home is less.
Sure.
You know, my doctor just yelled at me. He was happy. He says, "Oh, guess what? I finally made $1 million." And I said, "Yeah, because this was 3 weeks ago." And so I said, "Yeah, well, how much you pay in tax?" He says, $750,000 in taxes. So his net was about $400,000. That's not bad. But when I make $1 million, I keep $1 million. And the reason is because I don't make it by working for money. See, if you work for money, you're taxed. So that's why lesson number 1 in Rich Dad Poor Dad is the rich don't work for money. What we do instead is we create businesses as entrepreneurs. We acquire real estate. I don't invest in the stock market. Okay? So the reason is because as entrepreneurs, I have more control over my income, how much I make, and how much I pay in taxes. And because I'm an entrepreneur as well as an investor in real estate, I pay 0 tax. So every time I make, let's say, $1 million as an entrepreneur, I immediately invested in real estate. I have a 4-to-1 step up. So I put $1 million in real estate, I get $4 million from the bank. That's why I love banks. But the banks are screwing everybody else. You know, terrible. But it's good for me.
That's why you say when you print, it's good for you, but when you print, it's bad for people that work for money.
Because when you print, savers get creamed and people who work for
Nelson Mandela đã từng nói, giáo dục là vũ khí mạnh mẽ nhất để thay đổi thế giới. Chúng tôi góp phần vào thay đổi thế giới bằng việc cung cấp những kiến thức về kinh doanh, đầu tư, tài chính, giúp mỗi cá nhân đạt tới sự thịnh vượng và các doanh nghiệp phát triển mạnh mẽ hơn. Babylon với các chương trình hội thảo, khóa học quốc tế và trong nước mang tính ứng dụng thực tế cao về tạo động lực thành công kinh doanh đầu tư đã giúp hàng triệu người thay đổi cuộc sống tài chính cá nhân, giúp hàng trăm doanh nghiệp nâng cao doanh thu, lợi nhuận. Babylon là công ty đầu tiên và lớn nhất Việt Nam tổ chức các chương trình đào tạo quốc tế về đầu tư, tài chính và kinh doanh. Giáo dục tài chính là sứ mệnh của chúng tôi. Khách hàng thường xuyên của Babylon là lãnh đạo các doanh nghiệp, các nhà đầu tư, các nhà đào tạo, các cá nhân mong muốn tăng cường kiến thức về kinh doanh, đầu tư và đạt tự do tài chính. Babylon tự hào nhận giải thưởng thương hiệu nổi tiếng thế kỷ 21, thương hiệu hàng đầu Việt Nam 2015. Chúng tôi làm việc với các tỷ phú, triệu phú, diễn giả, tác giả hàng đầu thế giới như Donald Trump, Richard Branson, Robert Kiyosaki, JT Fox, Ken Jun, Kevin Wynn, Blair Singer, Ernest Wang, Mark Upcham, Bill Salmon, Hop Aker, Robert Riobel. Hệ thống các chương trình Babylon bao gồm